If you enjoy True Crime Buzz, but need some more true crime in your life, then check out this other awesome podcast that we highly recommend.
I'm Mike Morford, and I've been researching the Zodiac case for years. Zodiac, just the name. It sounds sinister. It inspires fear. The fact that a serial killer would give himself this moniker is disturbing. He would go on to taunt police by sending letters and codes to newspapers for years. And the attacks, they were something else altogether. If you were a young couple in a secluded area, you could easily be a target. And it wasn't just shootings on dark lovers' lanes. Zodiac would even attack with a knife in broad daylight while wearing an executioner-style hood. After a while, Zodiac changed tactics, and even lone cab drivers weren't safe. The Zodiac killer terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area and then vanished. But he left a lot of clues behind along the way. Clues that we're going to examine closely on the new podcast, Zodiac Speaking. New episodes of Zodiac Speaking come out every other Saturday starting March 13, 2021. Subscribe today wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single episode.
Hi everybody, welcome back to True Crime Buzz. I'm your host Brittany, and with me as always is Amber.
Hello.
What are you drinking tonight, Amber?
I'm switching it up and having a beer tonight because I just was in a beer mood. So I'm drinking a Coors Light, believe it or not.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm sticking with my Diet Sam's Cola.
Your Diet Sam's Cola that looks like a beer can.
It does. It does. You know, evidently old people mistake it for a beer can. And now every time I'm talking to someone like on video chat or someone's in my yard or something, I'm like turning it.
You have to have the label out.
Yeah.
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 Well, I'm glad you got your Diet Sam's Cola back.
Thank you. Me too. It's been a struggle. So do you have any true crime stories for the week?
Well, like I forecasted last week, it's been a much better week, personally.
Good.
However, Mother Nature has been a real bitch. And
Yes.
Tropical Storm Fred, of all names, I don't know who picks these names, but
I don't know.
Fred was a real bitch too. And he pretty much flooded Western North Carolina, where I live. And thank God I was okay and like nothing got tore up. No trees fell in our house, none of that. But like everyone around us pretty much, it was devastating. A lot of people got flooded. A lot of people lost pets, family members. There's still like 20 something people missing in a county over from us. Like it was devastating. So
Yeah, it was really bad.
So it was a rough week weather wise. But other than that, it was a good week. What about you?
Yay, my whole day. My whole day was a true crime. Look, guys, I love being a mom, and most days I rock it. I feel like, you know.
We know this. You preface every personal true crime story with, I love my kids, but.
Well, I'm just saying, I love being a parent, but, you know, this was not my kid's fault. It was just a really busy day. One of my kids had therapy that I had to participate in for the first half, and then right after that, I had to rush and cook dinner because we had open house tonight, back to back, and we were supposed to be there early to do paperwork. I didn't even make it there early to do the paperwork, okay? Matt got home, like, we're stuffing our faces with food. I don't know how we didn't choke. We're getting dressed. We're going. Mm-hmm. They let me through, thank goodness. But, so we did open house. I forgot to take pictures of my kids, which I hate. And then we get home, and my bed frame broke. So
thanks to your clumsy husband.
Yeah, thanks to my clumsy husband. But you know, you guys might not know this about me, but I'm not really what you'd call an adult. So this is the first bed frame I've had that has like a headboard and a footboard, and it matches all my furniture. And I was really like, I felt so adult and so happy.
Yes,
I
get it. I get it.
And now it's broken, and we're gonna have to take it apart, sit it on the floor with the blanket underneath it so it doesn't scratch the floors, and sleep like that. It's just the sideboard that broke, but I need it back in my life, and it's not even taken apart yet.
Well, that definitely sounds like a crazy busy day that just something unfortunate was bound to happen because you just had so much going on.
That's true.
Because God knows that happens to me all the time. Hence why we have these personal true crime tidbits at the beginning of every episode.
Exactly.
So before we get started today, we do have just a little bit of news for our listeners. Very important news, actually. So this podcast has been going very strong, if I do say so myself.
Yes,
we
ma'am.
have been delivering true crime stories and some dad jokes along the way consistently every week for the last year and a half. I mean, I can't believe we're already on episode 64. That just blows my mind.
It's wild. Wild.
I remember when I got to episode 10 and I was like, oh my gosh, we've done 10 episodes. We're on 64.
Yep.
But anyways, Brittany and I love doing this podcast together. It is our pride and joy. However, if you didn't know this, it is 100% independently produced. We do everything. We do our own research. We do our own recording, editing, posting, you name it. We do it all. So it's very time consuming, as y'all can imagine. And we both also work full-time jobs.
Yes.
I don't know how we do it, but we do. So after a lot of thought and a little bit of wine on my part, we both decided to start releasing episodes every other Tuesday instead of every Tuesday.
Yes.
I feel like I can hear the moans already.
Oh, no. I know. It's a lot, though.
It is. It's a lot. So trust me when I say we're not going anywhere.
Nope.
For sure. We're going to be old ladies doing this podcast.
80.
So be ready for it. But in order for us to continue to release quality content and maintain our personal lives and our mental health, which is super important,
Yes.
we felt this was the best decision. So we hope y'all understand. But also, just as a friendly reminder, we are still going to do monthly bonus episodes over on Patreon. So if you want some more Brittany and Amber in your life besides twice a month, there's always going to be a third monthly episode over on Patreon. If you're not already a member, just so y'all know.
And this is something, obviously, I mean, we didn't come to it lightly. So you guys know we talked about it. It was like a discussion. We have said from the beginning that like mental health and our family comes first. And so
yes,
this is how we feel we can do this and still continue to do what we love.
Exactly. But anyways, I am so excited for today's story because this is one that I've wanted to cover since I've started this podcast.
Yes.
And honestly, I should have saved this for our spooky true crime because it's so fitting. But I couldn't take it anymore. I had to do it. I've been wanting to cover him for so long, and today is the day.
Woohoo!
He was known as the Butcher of Plainfield. He was known as the Plainfield Ghoul. He has been called a serial killer by many, but his confirmed kill count was only 2 people that we know for sure. So, you know, in the traditional definition of a serial killer, it's got to be 3 or more.
Right.
So I always considered him a serial killer, and after you hear today's story, you probably will too. But his crimes were so gruesome that he would become the notorious inspiration for 3 of the creepiest horror movies and horror movie characters of all time. Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. I know everybody knows who that is.
Oh, yes. I feel like everybody knows who all 3 of those people are, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yes, that's right. Today I am covering Ed Gein.
Pew, 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 pew.
Pew, 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 pew. He deserves a pew, pew.
Pew, pew. I love that. Whoever saw the story, we boost each other up with that sound.
Yes. Yes. All right. So anyways, trigger warning up front. Today's episode is arguably the most graphic one we've done so far besides Jeffrey Dahmer. And that was half the reason this story interests me so much. The gore, but also the psychology side of it. So I know that you love this story.
You know I do, boo. You know I do.
So, Edward Theodore Gein, which it's an adorable name.
It's precious. I love the name Theodore.
It's precious.
So,
was born on August 27th, 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin to parents George and Augusta Gein. Ed also had an older brother growing up, Henry Gein, who was born 5 years earlier in 1901. And growing up in the Gein household was horrible. It was anything but loving. Ed's parents pretty much hated each other. Nobody even really knows how the two ended up together, let alone how they produced 2 children. Yeah. But the reason they only stayed together was because their religion did not believe in divorce.
Oh.
So off to a real loving start.
Like what religion were they?
Christian. Lutheran.
Oh, Lutheran. What? Okay, well, different times.
Yes. Ed's father, George, was a really bad alcoholic, but was quiet and kept to himself because Ed's mother, Augusta, ruled the roost with an iron fist. She was a very cold and abusive woman, and she had a very strict set of religious principles. And like I said, there was no love in that marriage. She thought sex was only for procreation, not for pleasure.
Oh.
And so they had their first son, Henry, and Augusta wanted a girl, so they tried again, but they got Ed. And so after 2 boys, she gave up.
That's miserable.
Isn't that the most sad, miserable thing?
Oh, God.
And with Augusta, everything was the devil, especially sex and women.
I know a few people that everything's the devil. I'm not going to name them,
yes.
but I do. I know a few people that really are like that. So, fun.
Everything's the devil. So, of course, I immediately picture Bobby Boucher's mama from The Waterboy.
Yes.
But, like, more mean, if that's possible. She would read from the Bible to the 2 boys every afternoon, but only the most brutal, like, fire and brimstone verses from the Old Testament. Like, you're going to hell if you blink. You know what I mean? Like, these poor boys.
Sounds awful.
Women were the devil and sex was the devil. And not only were girls off limits for the Gein boys, but even regular friends. Henry and Ed were only allowed to leave home to go to school and come straight back to do their daily chores. No friends were allowed to come over. They couldn't go play with their friends. And if they ever even came home and talked about like, oh, I played at recess with this other kid and he was really nice, she would start pressing and asking questions about them and come up with ways to turn them into the devil and say, don't associate with them. So like, for example, if he said, yeah, me and Timmy played on the playground today, she'd be like, oh, well, what does Timmy look like? Oh, he's got brown hair and blue eyes. She'd be like, oh, well, only the devil has blue eyes. You don't need to play with Timmy anymore. Like she would come up with ways to twist it around so that they couldn't even have friends.
Okay, see, Augusta is a good example of why mental health is so important, because there was something not right with this woman and she needed mental help, clearly. Like, she had some mental health issues and she needed help for it. I'm not like saying that as a joke. You can't act this way and be this way without needing some mental health help. So, unfortunate she never received that.
Yes, very unfortunate, because as y'all can predict, if you don't know the story of Ed Gein, this story doesn't end well. So in 1915, when Ed was about 9 years old, Augusta even went as far as to buy a farm and move 2 hours away from their hometown of La Crosse to another smaller town in Wisconsin called Plainfield, because she felt that the town she was living in was just riddled with sin and she didn't want anybody influencing her boys. And so they moved away to this farmhouse in Plainfield.
My Lord.
But growing up in such a hellish household, this alone had a major effect on the boys' social skills. They were always very quiet and reclusive. They were socially awkward to the max. Like they would not only be quiet, but like sometimes talk to themselves or laugh at their own jokes kind of thing. Not like you and I do.
Yeah.
That's different. That's like nerdy. Like talk to themselves and then laugh at themselves, like quietly. Yeah, it was very sad.
Couldn't laugh loudly because that's the devil.
Yeah, anything happy is the devil, pretty much.
So sad.
And this only caused bullies at school to pick on them even more. For what few hours a day they were away from their god-awful mother. Like, can you imagine?
No.
Being bullied at home, being bullied at school, there's no escape.
None.
And all this is very important regarding Ed's mental health and who he became as an adult, which we will dive into. But I had to start with the core foundation of Ed's childhood with this horrible woman as his mother.
Yes.
And while Augusta was equally mean and abusive to both the boys and even her own husband, Ed was somehow her favorite. Like she just was a little bit less mean to him. I don't know if it's because he was the baby or, usually the youngest is like the favorite. But somehow he was 1% less evil than Henry.
Poor Henry.
Both boys, especially Ed, had very much a love-hate relationship with their mom. Ed wanting nothing more than to make her happy. And this is the whole psychology of it, because it's like everything you do is bad and everything you do is horrible. But at the same time, that can either make you hate the person or it can make you try to over-please. Like you try to do everything you can to make them happy. It's just...
Right. Well, especially when it's a parent. Parents can do horrible, awful things to kids and still kids just want them to love them. Period.
Yes.
Not even in an Ed Gein story, like just in everyday life.
Yeah. He wanted nothing more than to make her happy, but he was also terrified of her.
I'm
and
sure.
hated how she treated him. She would beat him. She would scold him. She would tell him, you're going to grow up just like your alcoholic father. Like, just horrible things. But then in very small, teeny tiny doses, say that she loved him or that he was special. You know, just to kind of dangle him along. And it just really makes me very angry.
Yeah, that's really sick.
I mean, there's always a gray area. We've learned this. Nature versus nurture, all that. But when someone has that horrible of a relationship with their parent and you grow up, I feel like you either really love them, like you were blind to it all, or you really hate them and you never want to deal with them again. And he had both. He really loved her, but really hated her too. And I just can't imagine what that would be like, because I was very blessed and had amazing parents. So I can't. Shout out Barbara and David.
Woo woo.
Yeah, the beginning of Ed Gein's story is just so sad.
It is. It's awful.
Yeah.
That itself could be a movie. You know what I'm saying? Like, just his childhood.
Oh, yeah. And while Ed was commonly referred to as an oddball by pretty much everyone, he loved to read, probably because it was one of only the few things he was allowed to do besides chores.
Yeah, probably.
But he loved to read, and he read all the time. And he was considered somewhat bright in his reading and writing skills. So it wasn't like he was an idiot. He just lived with a horrible, horrible mom.
Well, and too, when you read, you can imagine going to other places.
Right. It's like an escape. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in 1940, Ed's father, George, died from an alcohol-induced heart attack. And as you may have guessed, Henry and Ed never moved out. So they were still living at home well into their 30s with their mom. But now that George died, they had to start working odd jobs to support Augusta and the farm. They both worked as local handymen, and Ed even babysat some of the kids in town. Which, if you know how he turns out, it's crazy to think about him watching your kids. But the community thought he was an oddball, but he was sweet and he was kind of to himself. And if you think about it, kids loved him because he was almost childlike in personality.
Yeah, but even in his pictures, he appears childlike.
Yes.
I think.
Yes, he
does. You can just look
too.
at him and tell.
But tragedy struck again just 4 short years later on May 16th, 1944, when Ed's brother Henry also passed away after falling victim to a fire. But the details as to how he died are not so clear.
Oh.
What we do know is that a brush fire on the property got out of control. It was starting to get really close to the farmhouse. And so Henry and Ed tried to put it out. And I guess the fire was so massive that they somehow got separated from each other. And as night approached, Ed realized he didn't know where Henry was and reported him missing to the police. But then when the police got a search party to go out and look for him, Ed led him straight to his body. He was like, oh, here he is.
Oh,
found him.
My God.
Not only that, but Henry's body really wasn't burned that much. It was covered in soot and it had bruises on his neck and the back of his head. So I don't know how, again, the whole community really thought like, oh, Ed's harmless, he's fine. And so they didn't think there was any foul play involved, but they listed the official cause of death as asphyxiation and no charges were ever filed against anybody. But a lot of people speculate that Ed was actually the one to blame.
Like, that's your only friend. Why would you kill your only friend? Well, I do know. I know you would because your mom hates him more. And if he's gone, she's going to love you more. I don't know. Like, maybe that's why.
Well, Ed did mention later on when talking about his brother, when they were starting to get older, Henry started saying like, you know, mom's kind of crazy and mom really isn't the nicest person. And I think Ed, because he loved her so much, wasn't going to tolerate that.
Yeah. Ain't nobody gonna talk shit about my mama but me.
Yep, exactly. So a lot of people think he murdered his brother.
That's sad.
Yes. So now with George and Henry gone, it's just Ed and sweet Augusta on the farm.
Oof.
But not for long. She had developed cancer, and after a series of smaller strokes, the big one finally took Augusta out on December 29th, 1945, just a year after Henry died.
And Augusta finally piped down.
She finally took a seat. And they said, hallelujah.
That's right.
Well, you would think that, but this left Ed all alone, and he was absolutely devastated.
Yeah, he didn't know what the hell to do with his life. Of course not. Augusta had been running it for him.
It was said that he couldn't even talk about his mother without crying uncontrollably, and said that, quote, this world didn't deserve her anytime someone would talk about her.
God bless him. He was like just so manipulated by that poor woman. Like that he thought that. That's just awful.
So Ed was now the only surviving member of the Gein family, and so he had no choice but to just continue living on the farm and working as the local handyman.
Today's episode is brought to you by DB. DB is a Scandinavian brand that makes backpacks and bags to help people on the move stay ready for anything. From the streets to the peaks, DB's gear is travel tested by some of the world's best athletes, adventurers, and creators. Over the past decade, DB has designed and developed, released, and refined the best bags in the market. With DB's patented hookup system, you are able to attach smaller products to your backpack, roller, or tote. I know that when I travel, quality luggage is extremely important to me. We are teaming up with DB to exclusively offer our listeners 10% off your next purchase by using the code POD10 or going to the link in our show notes. DB, it's time to move on. Time to get going.
Fast forward about 12 years later, on November 16th, 1957, a local hardware store owner, 58-year-old Bernice Worden, was reported missing, and police feared the worst because there was a trail of blood leading towards the back of the hardware store and the cash register was gone. The only evidence left behind was a receipt found on the floor for a gallon of antifreeze. Bernice's son, Frank, who also worked at the hardware store, told police that Ed Gein had been by the hardware store the day before and was asking about antifreeze but never bought any, and then promised to come back the next day. So between that and Ed just giving him the creeps, he put two and two together and was like, you may want to look into this guy.
Yeah.
So this convinced police to look into Ed. And on the evening of November 17th, 1957, Wishara County Sheriff Art Schley and one of his deputies went out to Ed's farmhouse with warrant in hand. They knocked on the front door, but Ed wasn't home and the door was locked. But because they had a warrant, they went around to the back cellar door and let themselves in. And what they walked into is literally what horror movies are made out of.
And they were not prepared for it.
They were not prepared for what they were about to find. The farmhouse did not have electricity, so it was pitch black, and they had to use flashlights to see their way around. They waded through piles and piles of trash that covered the floor and eventually made their way into the kitchen, but the sheriff bumped into something that was hanging from the ceiling.
Whoa.
Can you guess what it was? It was Bernice.
I was about to say, it's a body, for sure.
It was a body. Bernice was hanging upside down by her ankles, which were pierced with a crossbar, naked, missing her head, and gutted like a deer.
That's such an image, isn't it?
It really is. Her heart was found near the stove, but all of her other internal organs were found wrapped in newspaper and still warm.
Fresh.
Like I said, she was beheaded, but they did find her head. It was in a burlap sack in another part of the house between a pair of mattresses, with nails hammered into each of her ear canals and tied together with twine, so it looked like he was going to hang it up on his wall like a piece of art.
Wow.
But poor Bernice was not Ed's only victim. Police also found another head in a paper bag belonging to 54-year-old Mary Hogan, who ran a tavern nearby in Pine Grove. She had been missing since December 8th, 1954. So,
wow.
3 years prior. And that is only the tip of the iceberg for what else police would find. After searching the house all through the night and the entire next day, they found lots of human remains belonging to several different people. And of course, I'm going to list them for you.
Okay, please do.
They found whole human bones and bone fragments. Some of them were used to turn into eating utensils like forks and spoons.
He's getting real creative.
Oh, yeah. A box containing 4 human noses, a pair of skulls as decor on his bedposts, 10 female heads, soup bowls made out of human skulls, a lampshade made from human skin.
That one I knew.
4 chairs with seat covers made from human skin, 9 human face masks hanging on a wall like art, a shoebox containing 9 vulvas, which were all salted and treated to preserve them and dry them out.
Okay, well, I've heard of pocket pussies, but never shoebox pussies. So here we are.
Ed was a pioneer, that guy.
He was.
A belt made out of human female nipples.
That I knew about.
You can't not remember that. There was also a pair of human lips on a drawstring for his kitchen blinds.
What the fuck?
Yes.
What?
Yeah, and he made it so that the lips were separated so that when you pulled them, they came together to form a female mouth.
Interior decorator over here.
And the notorious skin suit, which was multiple female bodies' skins in the form of almost like a shirt, complete with a full set of female breasts.
I don't even understand.
As I mentioned earlier, when I was talking about the police wading through piles of trash, that's how his entire house was. It was trashed. He would basically only eat the cheapest, we're talking college food diet, like ramen noodles, pork and beans, like canned food. Like he would basically go to the store, eat a can of pork and beans, and then just like throw it on the floor when he was done with it. For years.
Augusta didn't teach him how to clean, did she?
She did. I think when she passed and he was all alone, he was like, fuck it.
I guess. I don't know. Wild.
But what's interesting is as much as the house was a disgusting mess and it had not been cleaned probably since she had passed, his mother's room was not destroyed and it was untouched.
I knew
Augusta's
it.
bedroom was perfectly preserved. Everything was in its place and everything was covered with dust and the door was shut. So it's almost like when she passed, he shut the door and then never went back in there. But the rest of the house was a hot mess.
Clearly.
So as you may have guessed, police brought Ed in right away. He was brought to the Washara County jailhouse, and another set of deputies that same night while they were still searching everything, they found Ed having dinner at a friend's house and initially just brought him in for questioning. And then when they realized, oh, he's got a house of horrors, they kept him. So at first he denied everything, but quickly caved and confessed to murdering Bernice Warden at the hardware store. He said he shot her in the head with a .22 rifle that was actually for sale at the store and then brought her back to his farmhouse where he then dismembered her. Ugh. He also admitted to murdering the tavern owner, Mary Hogan, 3 years earlier using a .32 pistol and basically treating her the same way as Bernice. As for the rest of all these body parts, you may ask.
Oh, I know.
Ed claims he didn't murder any of those people. He said that they all came from female corpses that he had dug up from 3 different local cemeteries. And at first, detectives didn't believe him. They thought maybe he had something to do with at least 4 other missing persons reported in Plainfield.
Yeah.
But they did go to the cemeteries and exhumed 8 different bodies that he pointed out. And they all had been mutilated and were missing body parts and a lot of skin, obviously, where he had just taken the parts he wanted and put them back in their graves. And they even double checked this. They went and exhumed 2 or 3 other random graves that he did not point out, and they were untouched. So it sounded like that was the truth.
It's almost like he wanted to just be like a corpse robber, but like...
Yes.
Maybe the skin just wasn't good enough. So he decided he needed some fresh skin. Less about the murder, more about the skin is what the vibes I'm getting here.
Yes, very much so. So how this would happen is that he would read obituaries in the local papers and then find out when their funerals were going to take place and dig up their bodies that night. Like, he planned this all out.
Yeah, clearly.
He also said that he had a friend, quote unquote, named Gus that would help him dig these graves.
As in Augusta?
Hot damn. I never put that together.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
It's gotta be. Because this Gus character... Nobody ever knew a Gus, met a Gus. Nobody ever saw Ed with anybody at all, let alone somebody named Gus. Like, we all think he made this person up, but I never put Gus and Augusta together. Oh my God.
Now you know.
So he said that Gus would help him and that they did this about 40 different times between 1947 and 1952.
Okay, just at that revelation though, like now I've got all these thoughts going through my head like, of course, Augusta would tell him to go dig up women because women are the devil. The women are prostitutes, so their bodies are nothing. Of course. Yes, perfect.
And another reason people don't think this Gus character is real is because Ed said that when he went to the cemeteries, he would go into this daze-like state and that he would sometimes come to in the cemetery and realize, oh my God, what am I doing? And he would leave without digging anybody up.
Look, you know good and damn well that I'm on the fence about ghosts because I've just never had an experience. I won't say they aren't real, but I swear to God, it sounds like he was haunted by this bitch.
Yep.
I mean, no excuse to go do the things he did, but it kind of sounds like it.
I mean, she wouldn't even let him rest even in death.
That's right.
If that was the case. So, because he went to the cemetery, from what he said, at least 40 different times, he only dug up 9 different graves because a lot of times he would come to before realizing what he was doing and he would just leave empty-handed.
And he probably really had some mental health issues, obviously. I mean, how could you not after the life, too? So,
yeah.
What a disaster.
But he said the reason that he would read these obituaries, besides knowing when to dig up freshly dug graves, is to specifically find overweight, middle-aged women that resembled his mother.
That's sad.
He elaborated even further and said that he would bring these corpses home, remove and tan their skins, and make a full women's skin suit that he could put on and wear around the house because he literally wanted to be a woman.
Well, that's just sad because you can be a woman. I mean, nowadays, you can. If you feel like you're a woman, you could do that. Like, had he lived in a different time and he wanted to be a woman, he could have been a woman.
So when he put on this skin suit, it was a full human skin face mask, the skin vest shirt thing with the breasts, and he would even take those vulvas in that shoebox and like wrap them around his own penis and pretend he actually had a vagina.
Though, too, I almost felt like he didn't just want to be a woman, though. Like, he wanted to be his mom.
Exactly.
And because that was the person that wielded the most power over his life and the person that was his everything, that it was just, I don't want to say it's not about being a woman, but it was a particular woman.
Exactly.
Less trans, more like psychological.
100%. It's a very sick and twisted way of handling certain feelings and emotions.
Right.
But like you said, I feel like if Ed would have been born at a later time and his mom wasn't such a bitch, I think he would have gone really far on RuPaul's Drag Race. Now hear me out.
Could have been. No, look, I'm with you.
Like, just for the creativity alone,
yes.
like, you gotta give it to him.
I mean, hello.
Like, he was so... He obviously knew his way around a sewing machine. He obviously knew how to make clothes. He obviously knew how to decorate.
It's coming. More psychological shit here. It's just popping in my head. Also, the fact that his mother really wanted a girl and didn't get one, I feel like maybe he might have thought, like, she might have loved me had I been that girl she wanted.
That, too. There's so much. This is like an onion of a psychological true crime story.
Let me just go ahead and say, though, because I just feel like there's going to be some asshole that's going to try to say, like, oh, trans people are like, no, they're fucking not.
No, not even.
Get the fuck out of here. Trans people are harmless. Quit hurting trans people. We're not saying that. I'm saying, obviously, he might have been a trans person who had horrible psychological issues from years of abuse, and it's really sad that he didn't grow up in a different home and in a different time so he could be who he wanted to be.
Exactly. And there's more to it than just, let's say, everything else aside, how he felt. Like, there's his mom being a horrible, abusive woman. It's the time period he grew up in. He grew up extremely poor. He
was all alone.
He was all alone. He got bullied at school. I mean, there's literally, you can look at this from so many different angles that I don't know how he made it this far.
And evidently a little malnourished as well, if we're going to be real about that.
Oh, yeah. Very malnourished.
Living in filth. I mean, there's nothing good going on with Ed Gein, even if you take all the rest of that away.
Exactly. But I just would love to think in a different time,
like,
in a different setting, RuPaul would have just taken him with open arms. When police heard about, like, the skin suit, your first reaction is, okay, well, did you eat these people? Did you have sex with these corpses? And he says he did not.
Yeah, and I kind of tend to believe that.
I do too.
I agree that at first, like, that's what I'm thinking, especially when you're like, the heart was by the stove. I was like, oh, God. But it wasn't on the stove.
I mean, if he's being as honest as he is about all this other stuff, about, like, putting on the suit and wanting to be a woman and all this other, like, why wouldn't he say,
well, and like, oh, I did kill these 2 women. Like, he's going to jail. What's he got to lose?
Right. Well, and when they asked him why he never ate any remains or why he didn't have sex with the corpses, he said because they smelled too bad.
I bet they did.
They had to. He also said, when you were talking about going from digging them up to murder, he said that he only dug up graves until about 1954 because that's when his friend Gus, quote unquote, could no longer help him, that he moved into an old folks home. So I guess he was an older man. I don't know. And whoever this guy was, he could no longer help him, and Ed couldn't do it alone, so he resorted to murder. But he did not like murdering people, so he was a product killer, not a process killer. He just wanted that skin. So, during Ed's confession, the Waushara County Sheriff Art Schley snapped and started banging Ed's head and face against the brick wall. And I don't know exactly why, but I guess maybe after being the one to discover that house of horrors and then also having to interview him and hear all these horrible details, I think he just lost it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it'd be a lot. It'd be a lot.
Yeah.
Especially if you've never encountered anything like that.
But this was very unfortunate because it made his confession inadmissible in court. So everything he was telling them, they could not use it. So, on November 21st, 1957, Ed Gein was charged with only one count of first-degree murder, where his lawyer entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity.
Okay.
He was declared mentally incompetent and unfit to stand trial, so he was sent to Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane in Waupun, Wisconsin. However, several years later, in 1968, Ed's doctor said he finally was sane enough to stand trial, which I didn't realize that could happen, but it did. I mean, that's 10 years later.
Well, yeah, but I guess if you're like on a good medication regimen and like therapy and stuff, maybe, I don't know, that doesn't even make sense. Because like, how do you ever recover from the life this dude lived?
I don't know. So when the doctor did say he was sane enough to stand trial, on November 14th, 1968, a week-long trial began, and Judge Robert Gallmer found him guilty of first-degree murder, but still legally insane. So they sent him right back to the mental hospital for life.
He probably needed to be there.
That's where he needed to be.
And I hope he like had some peace.
Oh, he did.
Glad we got him off the streets. He wasn't out killing anybody.
Right. No, he thrived in the hospital. Like, he found his home. He loved being locked up. He said he enjoyed all the hot cooked meals.
Oh.
He loved all the attention he was getting from the doctors and the staff, and was reportedly very happy, very well mannered, very well behaved. One of the nurses was even quoted as saying, "If all our patients were like him, we would have no trouble at all."
That's sad.
Isn't it?
That's sad that like he had to kill people. Well, he didn't have to kill them, but like, bear with me. He had to kill people and like grave rob to end up in an insane asylum where he would finally receive attention and hot meals and,
yes,
you know, feel loved and at home. And that's not right.
Well, and that goes back to what you and I preach all the time. Just basic therapy can do wonders and fix people. And how would this have turned out if Ed was able to like get on a proper medication and see like a psychologist or a psychiatrist and deal with the issues from his mom?
Or had CPS been able to step in and like remove him from that, him and his brother, you know?
This whole thing could have probably been avoided. We don't know. But yeah, he loved it there and he was very happy. He was later transferred to the Mendota Mental Health Institute, where he would spend the rest of his days. Ed Gein passed away on July 26, 1984, after battling cancer and respiratory illness. He was 77 years old. He was originally buried next to his family in Plainfield Cemetery, but he made a lot of headlines, as we all know.
Yeah.
And so people looked up where his grave was and would go visit it and vandalize it and even steal the entire gravestone. But it was found and has since been removed and in a museum in Wisconsin. You can still technically visit the gravesite. It's very clear where his grave was. There's just no headstone. As for the farmhouse of horrors, it was anonymously burned down in 1958. Anything that survived the fire, including Ed's car, was auctioned off to the highest bidder, because of course it was.
Of course, only in America.
Yep. His car was sold for $760 to a carnival sideshow operator named Bunny Gibbons, and he labeled it the Ghoul car, and he would take it around and show it off, saying that this was the car that transported all the bodies, and he would charge people 25 cents to see it.
Wow, okay.
I would probably pay 25 cents to see it.
I would have too. I mean, we went and looked at Ted Bundy's car. Like, it's no different. Totally would have done that.
To be fair, we
person.
did. Yes. And also, speaking of surviving artifacts, I have to brag. I have personally seen one of these myself, which was the 25-gallon cauldron that Ed used to discard unwanted entrails from women that he gutted. somehow after the fire and the auction, it ended up in this Wisconsin woman's house. She didn't know what it was, and she used it for a flower pot.
Oh my heavens. Okay.
Yeah. So Zach Bagans, the host of one of my favorite shows, Ghost Adventures, he bought the cauldron from this sweet lady for almost $3,000, and it is now on display at his haunted museum in Las Vegas, Nevada.
God, you're gonna make me have to go to Vegas, and I don't want to go to Vegas.
I have been. The haunted museum itself, there's a lot of true crime artifacts there, but there's also obviously a lot of haunted artifacts. But there's a whole Ed Gein room where this cauldron is in. And I told you this before, Brittany, but when you walk in, they make it seem like you're in the farmhouse, and they have like the rafters and they have the heat on. So it feels like it's really warm in there. Like there's a fire going and the cauldron's like in the middle of the room. But if you look up, you can see a body hanging from the rafters. It's real creepy.
Whew.
And I did get some heebie-jeebies when I saw it. It was really cool.
I bet you did.
But anyways, that is the story of Wisconsin's boogeyman, Ed Gein.
It's sad.
It is very sad.
I mean, it's horrific what he did to those two ladies, and it's not okay to just go steal people's bodies and their skin, but it's like, it's just so sad to think like so much, we shouldn't even be telling this story.
No.
Everybody says it. There's some people that are just plain evil.
Yes, I believe that, but I don't believe he was one of them.
No. Richard Ramirez was the devil, okay? Me and Augusta could agree on that, but but obviously this is not a person that was just born evil, you know?
From all accounts, he was very sweet, obviously reclusive into himself for obvious reasons, but yeah,
Right.
my gut tells me that had he grown up in a loving home, this would have never happened.
There's no way. There's no way.
Love our podcast? Then hit that subscribe button and leave us a review.
We're also on Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/truecrimebuzz and join today for access to all our exclusive content, including bonus episodes.
You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at TC Buzz Podcast.
And check out our website at www.truecrimebuzz.com.
Until next time, cheers!